Now let's look at the argument of design and see how does this point us to the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When it comes to the argument of design, there are several versions of this argument. One very powerful version is called Hisab al-Ihtimalat. In English, the law of probability, the law of chance. The law of probability, the law of chance demonstrates to us without a doubt that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, that first creator exists. An intelligent creator must have existed who created this universe. How do we examine this law of probability? When you examine life, you see millions, if not billions, if not trillions of factors at play. Everything. Look at life on earth. Just look at our atmosphere. Our atmosphere is about 500 miles in its height, in its width. It extends 500 miles into the sky. When you look at this atmosphere and you see the purpose of this atmosphere, how it shields the earth from harmful agents, from the radiation of the sun, harmful rays, and you see how precise and delicate that is. It protects us from meteor. And when you look at the composition of this air, for example, you see that the composition in our air is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and then you have some other gases. Why is it that you have this specific composition? Why not more? Why not less? By the way, some people think that you've got more oxygen, right? We think that our atmosphere is filled with oxygen than other gases. No, there's more nitrogen than there is oxygen. And our body can only take oxygen. You know, sometimes nitrogen, usually it finds its way into our bloodstream, but we can't absorb it. Our cells can't use nitrogen. Now, if you had more oxygen, if you had oxygen at 50%, what would happen? It would be very toxic. Number two, everything would be flammable, right? If you ignite one match, light up one match, you get fire everywhere. If one piece of wood would burn, it would burn everything around it. It would be highly combustible. Now, if you had only 10% oxygen, most beings could not survive, they would die. They would suffocate and die. So this delicate balance, 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, did this happen by chance? These are factors that we examine. Just a question. Now, when you examine every aspect of life, you see that the formula, the equation for it is perfect. It's perfect for life. It's perfect for a stable system. How gravity works, how the earth orbits around the sun, the distance between the earth and the sun. Had the sun been any closer, what would have happened? Had the sun been any farther, what would have happened? Now, all of this, the law of probability says, is it by chance? All these factors, are they by chance? Now let's go to the Big Bang and that first core, that dense core, to see how this law of probability plays out. So when we examine the Big Bang, it wasn't really an explosion, it was more of a rapid expansion. So you had this very hot core in the beginning. This core, you know, we don't know exactly the temperature of it, but it was in the trillions and trillions and trillions of degrees. That's how hot it was. Now suddenly, this core begins to rapidly expand. Do you know the rate of expansion that happened? Let's borrow a quote from Stephen Hawking, you know, who was a leading atheist in the world. Let me share with you his quote. He says, if the rate of expansion 1 second after the Big Bang had been smaller by even 1 part in 100,000 million, we'll examine how small that is. the universe would have recollapsed before it reached its present size. If that rate, that amazing rate of expansion, that rate of expansion was faster than the speed of light. Space, that core, which had space, started to expand faster than the speed of light. It doubled in size 90 times in such a fast portion of time. This rate of expansion, if it was a little bit smaller, just a tiny fraction smaller, the universe would have recollapsed. It couldn't reach its present size. On the other hand, he says, if it had been greater by a part in a million, if it was just a little bit faster, the universe would have expanded too rapidly for stars and planets to form. Do you know how this number that he gives us, if the universe was expanding at a rate that is smaller than 1 part in 100,000 million? Do you know how small this number is? Roger Penrose, who's an Oxford professor of math and physics, he gives us an example of how small this is. He says, if I give you a pin, I give you a dart, and you have a target, you're asked to take this dart and throw it at the target. Let's say that board, that canvas, that target board is the universe, is as big as the universe. And you take this dart and you're blindly shooting it. Now, every point on that canvas, which is as big as the universe, your dart, every point that it lands on would create a different universe or no universe at all. Most of the dots, if the pin would land at it, it could not create or generate a universe. Now, what are the chances of that dart, of that pin landing on a point that will create this universe that we have? The characteristics of this universe. How small is that chance? You know what he says? He says if every particle in the universe would be a zero, you would put a zero next to that particle. We human beings, how many atoms do we have? Just one single person on average, how many atoms do you have? 7 trillion atoms. 7 trillion, just one body. Imagine how many atoms and subatomic particles, right? And electrons and protons and neutrons there are in the universe. He says this number, this chance is so small because how do you write a number? If you want to write 1%, how would you write that number? You would write 0.01. That's 1%, right? He's trying to give us an example of how small this chance is that the universe just randomly landed where it is. Let's take this one. He says if next to every particle in the universe you put a zero, and you keep going and going and going, if you used every particle in the universe to put more zeros, you still couldn't capture how small this number is. It's so small, and I'll write it to you. It's 1 to the power of 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123. 1 in that number. That's how small the chance is that this universe just randomly expanded the way it did. Do you see how small this number is? Now here's the point in the law of probability. When the Big Bang happened, when that expansion happened, one of the first elements to be created were hydrogen, helium, and some other gases. Now the question is why? Helium and hydrogen, there were specific amounts in them. Had you changed those amounts by a bit, the universe couldn't exist. Why? Why did you get that specific number of hydrogen, of helium, of these other gases? Why? Why did the universe expand at that specific rate? Why? Each of these are factors. Now, when you keep adding these factors one after the other, and then you examine the history of the universe, and then how earth was formed, and how life was formed, the intellect tells you, look, even if you can argue it's not impossible, right? But this chance is so small, it's negligible. You can't even write it. No book, no board, no hard disk in the world can capture so many zeros. That's how small it is. With every factor, this exponentially grows. Let me give an example. If you have a coin and you flip it, what are the chances that this coin will turn out to be heads? 50, right? 1 out of 2. It's a 50-50. Now, if I flip it the second time, what are the chances of this coin turning out to be heads the second time? 25%. It's 1 in 4, 25%. Now if I flip it for a third time, what are the chances? 0.125. 0.125. You see how it decreases? Now what if I flip this coin 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, 1,000,000,000 times? Do you see how small that chance becomes? The factors that were involved in creating this universe are in the trillions and trillions of factors. And each factor that comes at play and interacts with another factor, that number just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. How can you accept that happened by chance without a being that was guiding this process? It's impossible. Now some atheists will come back and tell you, wait a minute. We obviously admit that this number is small. I mean, Stephen Hawking, he tells us about these numbers. He knows it's small. They'll tell you, we know it's very small. We're not arguing with you about that. But it's still possible. If you give it enough time in history of the universe, it could happen. With billions and trillions of years, it could be possible. And they'll give you the example of a lottery. What are the chances of you winning the lottery, right? But hey, it's happening. Every once in a while, somebody wins the lottery. Now, they like to use this example. Now, there are several observations here. First of all, when you look at a lottery, yes, the chances are small. That's true. However, the lottery has a system. Can you have lottery that exists randomly? There are intelligent beings who gave this lottery a system, a mechanism. All you're doing is you're drawing from that lottery. That works fine. Even if the chances are small, you will end up winning with so many people buying those tickets. But who put that system for the lottery? The human being. So a lottery, even though it works by chance, you winning is by chance, but that is based on a system. It can't exist on its own just like that. You can't sit in your house and suddenly win the lottery without going and buying the ticket. And there are people who designed the lottery. Atheists fall into this trap. They tell you this is by chance. Okay, look, maybe you will look at some factors and how they interacted, and you could say it happened by chance. Who put that system on which this law of probability works? It needs a system. An intelligent designer who designs a system. In that system, you can have chance. But the system itself coming into existence, that's impossible for it to just pop into existence by chance. Because chance itself needs a system. And they fail to understand that. They fail to realize that. So this is wrong to think that, okay, this is like a lottery. I know it's small, but it could happen. It cannot. It cannot. The universe could not have created itself, put itself into motion. It needed an external factor. Even if you consider that first hot core to be, the value of 0, which defines everything in physics, it needs an external factor to put it in motion. It can't put itself into motion. It's just impossible. Now here's the important point. Let's say There is 1% chance that the universe came into existence randomly, by chance, without an intelligent creator. Now that's impossible. And we saw the number is way small, right? It's 0.000, and just keep going with trillions of zeros, you still won't get there. The chance is very small for the universe to have just popped into existence like that, randomly, without an intelligent creator. But let's say, for the sake of argument, it's a 1% chance. It's much smaller. It's much smaller. It's not even possible, but let's say it's possible, and it's only 1%. There is 1% chance that the universe randomly came into existence without an intelligent creator. Whenever you have 1% on this side, what do you have on the other side? 99%. Because there's two alternatives, there's two scenarios, there's not a third. Either the universe just randomly, without an intelligent creator, came into existence, or there was a creator who created it. Is there another third possibility? If you know of a third possibility, tell me. What's a third possibility? Either it had a creator, or it did not and it randomly happened. Is there a third scenario you can think of? No, there's either of these two. Let's say, for the sake of argument, it's 1%, which is not. It's zero, first of all. And secondly, according to these scientists who are atheists, it's much smaller than 1%. It's 0.00, and put a trillion zeros, 1. And that would be 99.999, put a billion nines, right? But let's simplify it. 1 versus 99. Do you know why the Quran and the religion of Islam considers an atheist to be the peak of irresponsibility? And that's why the Quran is aggressive with those who deny the existence of God. Allah rebukes them in a harsh tone. Because God has given you the intellect, the power of reason. God is telling you, look, okay, fine. Let's say it's 1 versus 99. You took the 1% and you abandoned the 99%. That is the peak of stupidity. When someone takes a number this small and he's rejecting that other number. Because look, the atheist will not tell you it's impossible for God to exist. Most of them say there's just no proof. So it's not an impossibility. There's two scenarios. Either God, an intelligent creator, created the universe, or it happened randomly. There is no third. For it to have happened randomly, it's very small. And they admit to that. So why do you take this 1% and you leave that 99%? You know, let me give you another example. Let's say there's a plane and you want to take this flight. You are told that if you get on this plane, the chances of this plane falling is 99.999%. Right? 99.9999%, this plane would fall. Which intellectual, sane person will take that chance? The atheists are doing it every day. They're taking this small number and they're abandoning that number. That's the peak of irresponsibility. And that's the problem. Why do you leave the 99% and stick to that small number? Even if we assume this is possible, if we assume, just for the sake of argument, why do you abandon that? That's why the person who rejects the existence of God is making a joke out of his intellect. And God, the best treasure He gave you is the intellect. And when you abuse the intellect like that, do you have honor in the eyes of God? No. That's why God, He can choose to forgive whomever He wants. But there's a punishment for these people who knowingly reject the existence of God. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have no status with God, no reward from God. Don't expect a reward from God when you come and defy His existence, when it's the clearest reality in life. and you're taking this small percentage here, and you're rejecting that percentage. So this is the argument of design based on the argument of probability. The law of probability tells you there's so many factors in the universe, it's impossible for them to just have randomly collaborated and gathered together to give you this amazing, perfect system. Now you'll find, without going, too much into this, because we could take many courses just examining this point, but this is beyond the scope of this course. Some atheists today will come and tell you, well, not everything is perfectly organized. You have dark matter, you have black holes, and they're disorganized. That's a fallacy. Until today, we don't know what the black holes are, why they operate the way they do, what are their characteristics, what are their features. We don't know. They're still a mystery. So we don't know what they are, what their purpose is, for us to come and say, oh, that's a disorganized system. It's not. We don't know much about them. Science, with all of its advancements, black holes are still a mystery. How dark matter operates is still a mystery. So you can't say, oh, there's a lot of disorganization in the universe. As far as we can see, as far as we can perceive and analyze, everything is beautifully orchestrated in the universe. Everything is based on a delicate system. Every single atom and how it operates is based on a delicate system. All of these factors point us to the existence of an intelligent creator. So the believer is the one who will take this, the 99.99. It's 100, but let's say it's 99.9. Why take that? That's very irresponsible. It's like a person who will go on that plane. He says, hey, I know it's 99, but there's 1% chance that it will not fall. Who does that? Which sane person does that?